Thank you for being with us today. And for what I thought would be quite useful, perhaps just have a little bit of conversation about the kind of the pre-Minions years, and then we'll always have a bit of a chat about the Minions, and then obviously a little bit more about what's coming up. And I know that you're kind of always looking at opportunities for Illumination, but right back in the day, the early childhood days of Pierre, how kind of cine literate were you? Did you go to the films as a family? Did you go to the cinema as a family? Did you used to watch stuff? I mean, I understand you didn't have massive access to TV, so where did your kind of animation sort of roots, do you think, where were they grounded?
I think, well, my parents were kind of old, so they brought me up with. We went to the movies a lot to see, like I guess the classics. Like every time there was either a Hitchcock or a Marx Brothers, we would go there, and so I didn't quite know what else there was, and I did not have access to TV because my dad didn't want me to watch TV. Is what was the thing, so.
So you didn't grow up on the sort of the cartoons that a lot of kids would have done at the same time?
No, not at all.
But I guess that gave you more time then to kind of practice your drawing skills and do stuff like that, did it?
Well, you would think that, but no. I was kind of lazy also, so I read a lot, and that was those were my very early
So
years.
storytelling was it was in the blood then.
But when I did this movie, I kind of realized that it wasn't entirely true because we had a TV, but I was forbidden to watch it. But there was one thing that I was allowed to watch it. There was this thing in France called Stories Without Words, and it was a mashup of like little clips of silent movies. So there'd be Chaplin,
Yep.
Keaton, Lloyd, all the Laurel and Hardy. Anyway, and a lot of silent stuff and a lot of silence. And I remember it had the opening credits was animated and it had that music. And for the longest time in this movie, I kept it in for the opening credits where it was that piano thing, and John Powell sort of convinced me to change it so that he could write his opera.
It's big orchestral, yeah.
And so so I told him, yeah, if you make me forget how that my childhood memory of that music, then it'll be in the movie. And so he made it. He made that piece of music, which was great.
But that makes complete sense in terms of the comic timing of those films, including obviously this one in particular, because the new film is talking about filmmaking, but actually throughout the sort of Despicable Me and Minions films, the comic timing, they often operate in a kind of a bit like a silent film in lots of respects. You can see the big kind of Chaplin moments and the Keaton moments and so forth in there.
Yeah, and that was not. It's not particular to this movie, and not particularly to me. I think when you study animation, those guys are constant reference of like timing. And it's funny when you look at Tex Avery and Chuck Jones, they were closer to that era, and I think they had a comedic timing that we've lost today. Because when I see like all the stuff that they're sort of redoing with, but once in a while there's a Space Jam, and then it feels like they've not correctly analyze those movies because it seems like it's hysterical in a way and it's always moving, and they forgot the moments where Chuck Jones was just one very strong drawing and he'd stay like a second on it just with a little either eyelid thing, or the expression of the drawing was so strong that he could stay on it for a very long time, so it didn't move. Now when I see stuff nowadays with the same characters, it feels like, yeah, it's constantly moving, it's constantly hysteric, and those were not, that it was not done that way, or that it wasn't the feeling that I had watching those things.
So what was it, because you ended up going to probably one of the most prestigious kind of art colleges in the world. I mean, what was the kind of the route?
The Gobelin, you mean?
Yeah, the Gobelin.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Well, my route getting there was a little bit weird because I when I got out of high school, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and so a friend of mine said like, oh, we got to go to this university in Paris, and I think it's a good one. I went there. It was a bad one. The only good thing about it is that we were shown like every shown and explained all sorts of movies, and all sorts of good movies, and we were explaining the reason why they were good. I remember seeing Citizen Kane as a kid, and then I thought it was good. But then when people explain to you why it was even better. Like the wide angles, the seeing the ceilings, all that little stuff which you don't really, when you see it, it's not innovative or in any way. So it's and I'm talking about Citizen Kane just because there's I allude to that in the movie, and so it's all these things that. That I wanted to be a director. I went to that university. After 3 years, I said like, well, okay, I'm never going to make a movie. It's about everything I do is about like watching movies and telling writing stuff about why they're good and
Right.
so everything was theoretical and very intellectual, which is not me at all, and what happened next is that well, they changed it and they might change it again, but I had to do my military service, which I kind of pushed back, and so I went to the army, so I know how to shoot people and stuff, which is very useful.
Always useful.
Yeah,
Especially at the moment.
yeah, might come back. So all that training, well,
Yeah.
and so I went there, and ironically, I was far from home, and every weekend I couldn't go back to my real home, so I stayed at the girlfriend's house, and one day she said like, oh, because I was drawing, most of the times, and she said, oh, you got to see this guy who's the father of a friend of mine, and he does animation. So I went there. And I knew what I wanted to do. I saw this open space of people working on paper and animating. I said, "Oh, I want to become one of those guys." How, and that's how I knew. That's how. Well, he told me, well, you got to go to that school called the Gobelin, and so I went there. I saw that.
You say that, but I mean, it's quite a big deal going to Gobelin. I mean, they don't just invite everybody. I mean, it's quite a big thing.
Yeah, and at the time there was also this 3-step contest, I guess, where that each one was, you had to get the first one before getting to the second one, and so I really wasn't good. I only drew cute stuff. I didn't know how to draw. Like I had friends who drew girls and sorry, but and but I only drew like
the light drawings. Yeah.
Really, I was a cute guy. And,
well, it's putting you in good stead in terms of the films that you've worked on.
Yeah. And so I decided to stay 6 more months in my military service thing, just so that, because I didn't have anywhere else to go, so I stayed 6 more months, and I practiced for that contest, and somehow I managed to get in. Well, to get the first part of the contest, the second part, and the third part of the contest was just like talking to the headmaster of the school and showing like any sorts of drawing, which I did, and then eventually I was chosen, and I think in hindsight the reason why I made it in a way is just because I was surrounded by people which had done that all their lives, like drawing and stuff, and I was so unsure of myself and so not drawing. I wasn't in that headspace, so. And I was super scared. I was the older in that school since I pushed back my army, the oldest, sorry. And so I was there like every day. I was there like at 7 o'clock, and I was there at 7 o'clock at night and trying to
so super
catch up.
Really disciplined.
Yeah, because I was thinking this was my last. I really wanted to do that job because I knew what I wanted to do. So I wasn't the best when I got out of there. Like all my friends went to Disney, which at the time was in the suburbs of Paris, and they were doing Tarzan, I think, at the time when I came out. And I went to. I came here.
You came to London
because Spielberg had built his animation facility called Emblemation, where he did a Five-O.
It was American Tail, wasn't it? Five Goes West.
Exactly. Yes, and I worked on a show called We're Back with Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And then that's when I had an epiphany, because I had always this complex of drawing. Like I couldn't, I was just drawing cute stuff, and I was asked to draw like Disney style characters, which I managed to do, but very very painfully. What happened was that at the same time, computer animation was getting used more and more, and I was a total geek. I mean, I programmed. I always had a computer at home. Like
so exactly the right time for you in that respect.
Perfect timing, because I wasn't that good, but I had this technical skill, and I knew a little bit how to animate in 2D, and so all these things, meaning that when Toy Story came out, and when people starting to be more and more interested in those new images, as they called it, I was one of the first 2D animators to go into 3D.
So that transition then was not such a big deal for you, because you'd already worked in both, in a sense.
Exactly, and I was one of the the few to make that step, and rapidly I became this sort of animation director, but it was more technical technical TD that they would call it today. I asked mostly in animation, and then I was asked at some point to teach someone animation. Like I had a week, so I told her, like, well, I can't really teach you stuff, but let's help me do this little short. I have this idea, so let's take a week and do it. I did this little thing, and it was at the time YouTube didn't exist, obviously, but we had a commercial in this company called Ex Machina, and that commercial sort of went from agency to agency, and that's how I got my first job in doing commercial. They saw that weird rendering thing that I did, which came out of the fact that I didn't know how to render properly, and properly light.
And at this time, just in terms of giving it some context, obviously the technology evolves virtually by the month or the day.
Super fast, yeah.
But at this point, it was really right at the very, very beginning of that journey, if you like, when Toy Story sort of came out and sort of revolutionised things, but the whole world had to kind of catch up with that, didn't they?
Yes.
I mean, when you said, I mean, in terms of what you were able to do and what the kind of conditions were, because like in terms of memory and everything and capacities and stuff, it was all. It's just to put ourselves into that mindset for the kind of way you were working back then compared to now.
Well, that's why I rarely show what I did back then, because it really, makes my eyes bleed. It's really horrible.
But at the time, it was absolutely groundbreaking. Actually,
I don't know, but yeah. So I guess because I'm sort of here, still alive, and so I kind of surfed the wave, and again, luck, meeting people, being nice. I guess I'm kind of nice.
Might go to the audience vote on that in a minute.
Yeah. No, but that kept me like getting jobs after jobs and stuff. So I was after I did that commercial, I just went back to being an animator. And it didn't, I didn't get that next job as being a director before. After maybe 6 months later, I got a new job, and so I was really for 4 years I was being both. And so I never at some point did I say, even today I can't say that I'm a director, because I do all these things, and I have the feeling that every time I do something, I have a feeling this is my last one, but the 4 last ones I said it saying like.
Is that a kind of imposter syndrome thing?
Totally, yeah.
Because actually, you are a director, and you're here.
Yes, but maybe this one, and I'll tell you why. Because every time I'm thinking, there's a reason why I'm saying, well, I've kind of sunk illumination, or Universal is never going to.
But also, if you look back on, I mean, I'm not obviously not here just to sort of inflate your ego, but these are a multi-billion-dollar franchise, and so I know that's a big responsibility. But actually, you have a proven track record.
I would say otherwise, but I'm not a billionaire. So.
No, true. But somebody is on the back of them.
Yeah. No, totally. No, the reason why I just want the imposter thing is it's just because all the movies that I've done before this one, the 4 ones that I did 3 Despicable Me's and 1 Minion, I was not necessarily at the helm of it in terms of...
Because you were working with other people. You had a co-director as well.
I had a co-director, and also the script wasn't mine, and also there was I have a very, very hands-on producer in Chris Meledandri, and he's really, really like pushing us to try stuff and in the end, you don't necessarily agree with what you've achieved. And every movie that I've done before this one, I was there thinking, that's the last one for sure, and it won't be my fault.
And I guess the difference though is you've directed this one pretty much solely, and you've co-written this as well, haven't you?
Yeah, that's the reason why.
Hence, this being a big responsibility.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
So if that one doesn't work, then it'll say a lot about me.
So Pat and Stan, for people in the audience who are not aware of Pat and Stan, can you just tell us a little bit about what that is and what they are and about their kind of importance?
Yeah, they were sort of important because I was doing all these commercials, and then there was something happened at Annecy, which is this famous festival in France, and where
actually the new film is going to be the world premiere on opening night of Annecy.
Yes,
which is a massive thing.
Yes.
Not to put too much pressure on you.
No, I don't. It's my last movie, I tell you.
Yeah, of course, sorry.
I don't care. I was doing just commercials, and at some point, this lady came up to me at Annecy and said, like, did anyone call you? I said, so I didn't know this lady. I said, well, who are you? And she said, oh, sorry, I'm head of she worked at this TF1, which is like a big TV channel in France, and they have this, they still have, but this 3-hour slot every day for kids, and she was telling me like, oh, would you mind if I pitched you something? Would you mind like entering the pitch and so I said, sure, what's it about? And then she tells me that I have to invent those 2 characters, and that they'd be the front characters of those 3 hours, but in little clips. And so but she called me, but all the other guys were working on it for months and stuff, and she just saw me, and she said like, oh, I saw that commercial, would you mind?
Wow.
So 2 weeks later I was forced to deliver something. So I really went like, okay, it's a duo, there needs to be a big one, a small one, maybe the big one is a little bit dumb, maybe the small one thinks he's smart, and it all went, and then maybe the big one is a hippopotamus, maybe the small one is a dog, and it all went like really fast because I had to do stuff very fast. And then it turns out after those 2 weeks that we were just 2 front runners. All of the other ones were eliminated, and it was a time also where they had money, so they said like, okay, well, you're both going to make tests. So the other guy made a test, and I made a test, and I didn't like the official test that I conceived, so I did another one in parallel, and that's the one that it was the beginning of YouTube. And that's the one that sort of exploded on YouTube.
What we're going to do is we're going to play 2 clips. We're going to play 1 clip now, and then we're going to talk a little bit more. Yeah. But the first clip we're going to do is the bath time one.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just a very, very quick clip.
That one says a lot about
But it gives you a little flavour. But it also, I think, kind of does tell us quite a lot about you in terms of some of the humour that comes out in some of your in the later films and stuff, which is not a bad thing. So can we play the first clip, please?
After doing that, I thought I'd be fired, and then that would be my last thing. Again.
But all those things that I guess in 2D you might take for granted, in CG, all have to be reimagined. So like all of those different components, the bath, the curtain, the creatures themselves, all of those things have to be thought about in a different way, don't they, from a computer-generated point of view?
Yeah, and it was a time where imagining that you would render that with shadows was deemed expensive. So
Yeah, and
so
anything to do with water, and it was like a holy grail for quite a long time as well.
no, totally. That's why nowadays you can do water with hair that's wet and clothes and all that stuff. There's no limit now to what we can do.
And because you were doing lots of little pieces, does that sort of focus the mind when it comes to kind of storytelling in terms of you've got to tell something really, really quickly?
Yeah, and that came also from that's when I started writing. Believe it or not, this is written. But it does tell you, like, I love things that where you start something, you tell something, and then you close it. And it's a comic book thing also, like a French comic or Belgian comic book thing. When you start reading, and then even if it's an album and a whole story, there is this Belgian thing, I guess, that says, like, at the end of each page something must happen, so that you
keep turning the page.
It's like a page turner, but in comic book form. And I always try doing that. Like, even writing for Despicable Me, all that stuff is in the I think makes a little bit what makes a difference, I think.
And there was a kind of real viral moment with Pat and Stan, wasn't there, in terms of like the line "Sleeps Tonight" was kind of quite.
Well, that was the test that I did in parallel of the official test, and that's the one that got
landed
viral.
in quite a big way.
Yeah.
Should we just play a clip from that? Can we play clip 2, please?
That was a little test. I couldn't go further because I was doing other stuff, but that's the thing.
How long would it take to do something like that?
A couple of weeks, I guess. But we were two on it. It was me starting it, and then I couldn't finish it, so I gave it to the girl who I gave that 1 week of animation course to finish it.
Okay, well that's good. So you're obviously a good teacher then. So she came. Was able to complete it.
But the nice thing about it, her name is Babette, and she went on to help me do all the Minion crowd stuff on the Despicable Me's, which is the most. I mean, the crowd stuff is really something I have to heart, because it's like, where's Waldo, and all these things where it's every time you watch it, you notice that some Minions are doing something that's really not.
Now that you said the M word, so can we just talk about Illumination and where that all kind of came from, and what your role in Illumination was at the start?
So what I'm going to tell you is I don't know what the truth is. It's because my point of view is something, but then when Chris Renaud, the other director of Despicable Me, tells how it happened,
he's not here today, so
no, it's bullshit.
So as far as we're concerned, you're the truth.
No, even Chris, Mel Dondry, the producer, I'm not sure he's telling you the truth. So I don't know what the truth.
Maybe
is
all three of you are, and the truth is somewhere in between, isn't it?
So the way it happened, I have the feeling happened, is that I was doing this shoot somewhere in New Zealand for a commercial. Because weirdly enough, I was, I'm an animator, but at some point I was doing like a lot of hybrid stuff. So they sent me all over the world just to shoot plates, and then I'd come back and then put weird animals in them. So I was in New Zealand, and then I got this phone call from Jacques Bled, who's the owner who was the owner of MacGuff, which is the Illumination studio in Paris, which it became. And was telling me, like, okay, I have these two Americans in my office. They want to see animation stuff, but all the animation that we're doing is yours. So do you mind if we show them to you? I said, yeah, sure. And I was very happy doing Pat and Stan and all these commercials. I had I had a job, and commercials are great just because every 2 months they change, and you have this thing about, like, this competition thing where you're competing to get a job, and then when you win, it's great. When you lose,
because you're constantly pitching for new work.
Exactly, yeah, which I really liked. And so they came. I wasn't here. They watched the stuff that I was doing there, and they said, like, okay, well, it's great. When can we meet him? So I came back, met with them, and they said, like, oh, so and they told me, like, okay, Chris Mondandri worked at Fox, did Ice Age, did the Simpsons movie, and was leaving Fox, hired by Universal to do exactly what he was doing at Fox, meaning like family movies. And I was very, very doubtful about. I didn't know the guy, and I had very bad experiences with American and French producers, and so I was very not scared, but I had doubts. About, and then he asked me, like, we have this project called Evil Me, and he pitched it out to me, but he didn't have a story. He just had pictures, story about bad guy, like a Bond. Imagine a Bond villain, and imagine that Bond villain, but in his regular life, like he's evil during the day, and then he gets home, and then he has to face the unions of his workers. He has to pay the bills of he has plumbing problems. I don't know. The basic, very regular life stuff. And so I liked the concept was nice, but he didn't have a story. So I was there thinking, well, when you have a story, maybe I'll see if I want to work with you. And and that lasted quite a long time because he sent me a script. I didn't like the script, so I said, yeah, no, I'm okay. I'm doing all these other jobs, so I don't need to. I don't feel like
playing
I need
hard
to
to
do
get.
it. Well, in hindsight, yeah, but really, I didn't.
Really,
I wasn't playing. And every time, and I got to say this, like in all clarity, he thought it was a money thing. And so every time he got, but we're giving you this much money. I say, well, it's not about the money. It's just that you don't have a story, and I don't want to spend like that much amount of time on this. I said, okay, but and then he'd come back like 2 months later with.
So it was a little salary counter going up as well.
Yeah. So, well, anyways, but the problem in the end, I think the problem was that I didn't trust the story. Like, he didn't have one, I thought, and I thought that he wanted to make the script that I was reading, and even though he was saying like, but this is the way we do things. We launch things, a movie with a script that's really maybe not good, but with a good potential, and then we make it better. I didn't believe in that formula. I was wrong because the first movie sort of came out of one scene, the scene where Gru, the evil guy, puts those 3 little orphans to bed, and that the whole movie sort of expanded from there. But I really did not believe that it was going
to. And at this early stage, when you were finally working on the film and you'd sorted out whatever needed to be sorted out, did you know at that point there was the potential for more films to come in the future?
No, oh no, that was
you were thinking of it very much as a one-off.
Yeah, it was just a one-off, and it was highly painful. The only thing that I saw had potential was that initially in the concept, minions were those armies of workers, basically, or big thugs. I said, like, well, we can't do that. They didn't have the budget of like a Pixar or DreamWorks at the time, or Blue Sky. And so I asked our designer, Eric Guillon, to design stuff that we could like replicate, like make hundreds of them. And
so it was quite budgetary
totally.
Constraints in terms of when it came to. But actually, the design has become iconic now, hasn't it?
I know, but out of accident, it's an accident. They weren't, and they were tertiary characters. They weren't supposed to be like as much.
This is Gru's story. It was his kind of his arc, the relationship with the children, and as you say, these were kind of. But actually, that isn't what. No. In reality, I mean, we'll watch the very first clip. So I think this is the first clip from Despicable Me, because I think this is quite a good clip in terms of showing you how the minions first, because they were quite kind of. They were like a rabble, and they're quite violent in terms of what's the first clip?
So all these guys were, that animator. I was supposed to form an animation that was her. All that. So
wow, amazing, and actually, it's so interesting because it's sort of they're kind of cute, but they're not cute because they're part of the villain network, aren't they? Yeah, he's the the villain. They're serving him. They're grabbing out kind of like cleavers and other instruments and stuff. So, did you have a sort of sense during the making of the film in terms of people's reactions to those characters, quite how the public was going to respond, or was that something that happened after the film had dropped?
No, it happened when we usually do these movies in 3 years. There are like very few exceptions, but usually the first year is writing, designing. The second year is we start editing and layout, and then the third year is just like production. We're late and we have to finish the movie. During that first year, there are 6 months where we build the models for Gru, as for instance, and we make tests with them, and the minions. We did that, but they had this they slightly changed in design. They were a little bit more realistic. They were that way, but had lips and had features that really were too human, and so we simplified those. But when they were still a little bit toad-like with those human features, we just stuck a walk on them, and then we discovered something that was a little bit magical. I said like, oh my god, they look cool actually, and I sent that over to Chris immediately and said like, oh, it's not correct. We're going to simplify it, blah 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 blah. But I think you should see this because it has something, and out of that little test, he said like, oh, but that's our teaser. We gotta tease the movie, and we let's not tease it with the main story, Gru, the girls, and let's tease it with those characters. And so we did. Our next test with them was actually the trailer for Despicable Me, which didn't involve Gru or anything. It was just those creatures and Despicable Me, and that's
it's interesting how you plan things in a particular way, but they can just take a different life of their own sometimes. Well.
And also it's Chris was Chris's. He saw that and he knew how to market the movie all of a sudden.
Yeah,
he had the angle of we're going to market the movies with those guys.
We're going to do another clip from the first film, which has got a sort of, the kind of the James Bond element, because you've got the sort of the shark in the tank, and you've got the sort of Mission Impossible
yes.
sort of hanging from the ceiling.
Vector,
and,
yes.
It's a real kind of action adventure, but real comic. The comic timing that you talked about when you were talking about the sort of the early silent films and stuff, it's absolutely in there as well. It's kind of a really kind of film homage in a way. But could we play the next clip, please?
There's this whole Blake Edwards also thing to Despicable Me, because I can't Peter Sellers or the Pink Panther, when Clouseau gets home, and then there's an element of that which I love, and we've gotten better at doing this, because I think in Despicable Me 3 it's him and his brother climbing that tower to get to the villain, and we it's a little bit like that, but way more violent and comical, I think.
And can you remember when about the casting for Steve Carell in that role, in terms of how long did it take him to come up with that voice, and where did the idea of casting him come from?
That was the casting idea was Chris Meledandri, because he had worked with him on Horton, and the thing about Steve Carell is that he reads the lines. And he goes over it, and you leave him alone. Actually, he reads it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and then it becomes entirely something else, because he starts ad-libbing, and it's magical.
So you had to record him pretty early on, then, did you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's you mean?
Well, what I mean in terms of if he's ad-libbing, you have to then the animation has to work accordingly to what he's doing.
Oh, totally. Yeah. But we usually record and edit stuff before it gets passed on to animation. So the idea was to record him, and then he does his thing, and then we edit the best thing that he's done. And he's the greatest ad-libber ever, because there was, again, I'm referencing Despicable Me 3. There was this scene that the writers didn't want to do, and so I pitched it out to him. It's him and his brother, and they have both these different characters. Gru's grumpy and blah blah blah. The other one is very happy, And I was thinking like, oh, maybe when they're bonding, maybe they sort of switch role, and then and I pitched the idea to Carell, which said, oh, let me try it. And so he did one voice first, like Gru doing his brother Drew, and then as a second pass, he did the other guy. But there was nothing written, so it was him just riffing off what he was saying as the other character, playing the other character, and it was like it was my inception. So,
And often in animation studios, you kind of work off a sort of a scratch soundtrack, and you've got different people doing the voices before they're properly cast.
Yes.
And you were the scratch voice of the Minions.
I was.
Is that right?
Yeah. Well, the way I became the voice of the Minions is again by accident, because out of reaction of they had asked another guy to pitch out like, oh, the Minions could sound like that, but it sounded like very electronic, it didn't feel like it felt like robots, but not, organic characters. And as an example, I recorded myself and said like, oh, you should do it more like that. And when Chris heard it, he said like, well, just do it. I said, well, okay. That was 18 years ago.
Wow. I bet you never thought all these years later you'd still be voicing them.
And particularly when the Minions movie arrived, I didn't think I'd be, voicing all of them.
And do you have to? I mean, do you have to think yourself into the different? Like, if you're just like Kevin as Bob, are you going through a different thought process for each one?
I do. Yeah. It sounds. It's. I mean, I do that at my level. I don't overthink things. So it's not me thinking like, okay, Kevin had a difficult childhood.
Your backstories for each one.
Yeah, no. It's like, oh, that one's cute, so I'm trying to play cute. That one doesn't care about anything, so that's me. So
and when are you recording? Like, is it like a sort of a filter and stuff that you use, or?
It's a little bit. I was not a techie in terms of sound, but I became one. And the first movie, I just pitched my voice. I plug in, pitch, and that was it. The trouble that I found.
So pitch is a bit of tech kit that you.
Yeah. It's just like you record yourself, and then you put this little plug-in in there, and then you say like pitch it to that amount, and then it pitches your voice. But the thing is that it destroys also the quality of the sound. It starts to sound like there is an effect on the voice.
Right.
And
like
so,
a distortion, sort of.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it sounds saturated, and you feel that there's something wrong with the quality of the sound. And so the way I sort of discovered that also because when I was asked to do like songs, I couldn't find the proper pitch because I didn't understand why once I pitched my voice it was out of tune. Now it feels like obvious, and so the thing that I found was that if I recorded myself like in slow motion, like at a different frame rate, and then I played it back at real time, then I would have like great quality. The pitch didn't sound like an added on effect and stuff like that. And I could sing because I could have a reference of me singing at normal pace. Then I would slow that down. I would sing to that out of key track. And then when I put everything back in real time, I would magically be in key. But the trial and error.
Well, what I think is interesting is also, so a lot of people who end up working in animation and on the sort of, the actual sort of drawing side of it or the computer side of it, often do so because actually they're not kind of, although they're actually performing and they're acting through what they're drawing or what they're creating, they're not necessarily kind of, sort of big personalities who want to go and, act. And a lot of the actors obviously then can do that. But what's interesting from your point of view is that you, obviously, you're an animator, you're a director, you do all those things, but you're voicing these characters that are really larger than life, big characters, and you're having to come up with not just the words, but the different noises they're going to make when they're reacting to things happening, they're being hit in the head, and whatever noise comes out. But you don't do that in a kind of showy way. You keep that very private when you're recording those voices. Is that right?
Yeah, because I'm sort of ashamed.
You're not a performing CEO.
I feel like
So what does that process look like then?
Oh, well, it's me in my office trying to think like, okay, I gotta. There's a minion telling you. I have to make people understand that this guy is telling a joke, that the other guy opposite of him is not finding it that funny. Have the first guy say, but it's funny, and explain the joke. So you go through that, and then you realize that you can tell that story just with blah 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 blah, and just if you find the correct melody.
Words
but the main thing is the melody and the context.
That kind of intonation and
And then once you get that, then you've got. I know that in animation, I've got ideas to convey the fact of like, oh, this was the punchline, and you know, I have the other guy react to that punchline by saying like, what the hell, and then go from there. As long as you can understand, I mean, there's a lot of waste in what I do. It's like really like on the first Minion movie, it was horrible because I would wake up at 7, do Minion voices until 9, and then go to work, do my regular work, and then come back, do the cook for the family. That's what I do, and then pick it up the next day. And also, I wasn't writing the things, the script, so I would know that whatever was written, I couldn't do it.
So would they write in the script what the minions are actually saying, and then you would kind of translate them effectively?
Yes. But it wasn't that way. It wasn't always that way. I think the first script Brian wrote, he sort of had to go at Minionese, meaning that I didn't.
And that is the official term, Minionese.
Well, yeah, I didn't invent it. It's just like I read it somewhere. I said,
okay.
But I remember he wrote it. I mean, the first Minions was just hell because we didn't know what story we wanted to tell, and also we didn't know how to write for the Minions. This one was super easy because I knew exactly how to write it. I was alone at the beginning. I had Brian come in and help me later once the story was solid, and so. But in the first movie, it was horrible because I knew that some of the stuff that was written was not going to work, like in terms of Minion performance, because I couldn't. The context was wrong. I wasn't good enough, and there were all these factors. And I remember that first hour and a half that we had, the first preview screening that we had, was just like unbearable because it was gibberish for an hour and a half, and we were all there saying like, oh, well, we're screwed. And so that's the reason why we added like a human characters. But then as soon as we added human characters, it became their story, the human story, and less the Minions. And so in hindsight, I think that the first Minion movie sort of worked at a scene level, but it's not working at a movie level.
Let's watch a clip from Despicable Me 2, if that's okay, and then we'll talk a bit more. How do you feel when you watch your own stuff? I'm feeling a sense of discomfort.
Yes. But yeah, I find it. Well, I don't know what to think of what I do. Really, truly, I'm very happy doing it as I'm doing it. But then when I watch it, I say, I see particularly those early ones because I see technically that each movie we've done, I've had the Minions redone every time because I feel when I look back at the first one, the teeth, the mouth. All that is very, very scary to me now. So I try to make it better. So going back in time just reminds me that I made a good call.
But that's an interesting evolution, though, isn't it? And it's also about the technology as much as it is about artistic expression. It's about what you can do now and what you couldn't do then.
But also, I would say that it's my eye also that changed, and I can see the mistakes, the technical mistakes that were there at the time. And that we couldn't correct because of timing issue, production issues, or whatever, and also because I wasn't as good as I am today.
And I guess what's interesting about these films is that on one hand, I mean, obviously it's a business, so a film makes X amount of money, you're going to do a second one, and that makes sense and stuff. But actually, the good thing is the films don't stand still in terms of like you've grew in terms of obviously he's the villain in the first film. We're seeing this more sensitive side, but he still can't get the villain out of him. And there is, the characters are evolving with the films as well, aren't they?
Yeah, and I was kind of when they pitched me the second movie, it was Chris said like, okay, well he's gonna be this evil character who's no longer evil, who's just grumpy now. It's gonna be this lady, and it's gonna end up with a marriage. I was there like, oh my god, a marriage really? And to his credit, he always said like, bear with me, and we're going to try other things, but maybe the marriage is going to be. So he tried throughout to have like another. He tried avoiding the marriage thing, but then found an idea that I could get on board with, and that made it for me. And we found the ending, and I found a twist. We got really, really corny on the marriage, which was not there initially. and so that I was more at ease with the choices. And that movie is actually, I think, the best one in terms of that I've done. I think that we've done. In terms of storytelling, in terms of how we integrated the minions within the main story, because the minions were just cutaways in the first one. The character of Lucy also was very had comedic, physical comedy potential, and I remember during the 6 months there was just a little a sentence in the script saying like Lucy tases Gru and puts him in the trunk of her car, and we did a 3-minute test of poor Gru being tased, and then it'd be too heavy to carry, so she'd roll him in a ball and start rolling him and start hitting all these stuff, and she'd put him in the trunk, but then try to close the trunk, but then his leg would get in the way, so it that was 3 minutes of highly violent stuff,
torture.
which made us like really made it for a good moment, and it's 10 seconds in the final movie. But
because of time, I'm going to go to the next clip now. And you've talked a little bit about the Minions film itself anyway, so we're going to play a clip of the Minions, and then we'll talk a little bit more about where that came from. It felt like a strangely appropriate and inappropriate clip all at the same time to show that. But I guess there was inevitability with the success of the Minions. I guess as all the merchandise that started to come out, and the focus on, obviously, them within the Despicable Me context was kind of growing. So I guess it was inevitable there would be a kind of a Minions film as such. What was your kind of feeling about working on that, having done the 2 Despicable Me films with Gru as the sort of central character, and then them being promoted, so to speak, in that respect?
Well, I thought it was possible. Chris Maledandri asked me, like, do you think it's possible? I said, yeah, sure. What would be the problem? Whereas Chris Renault said that, no, it won't. It can't work. And I said, why can't it work? And then, turns out he was right, because we didn't know how to handle the thing. As I was saying earlier, that first hour and a half that we did was just horrible to look at and horrible to listen to. And so we had to find the proper balance. And from the moment we sort of invented Scarlet, it's sort of became too much her story also. And it's a movie that I love because there are set pieces in there that are great. But then as a movie, as I was saying earlier, I don't think it works because it had too many people intervening and saying like, oh, we should do this, oh, we should do that.
Is that a studio thing?
Yeah.
So I guess there's a difference between when you're working in Paris in your studio, but you've also obviously got Universal and Chris and people who Chris works with overseas in LA.
Yeah.
I guess at this point now it's become such an important property that everybody, I guess, wants a bit of a say in it.
Particularly on this one and the Despicable Me's that will follow this movie, the 3 and 4. And that's the reason why on Minions and Monsters, I didn't want any of that. I said, well, I want to write the movie. I want to be in direct contact with Chris Maledandri, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I want to have a little bit more. It's not about control. It's just about like saying like, yeah, I don't want
I guess
the noise.
It's about trusting your vision ultimately, isn't it? I mean, you've got a proven track record now, and I guess it's about saying actually, putting their money where their mouth is in a sense.
Yeah, but I don't know if I'm right or wrong. So I need someone to tell me like, oh, watch out because you're being either too violent or too something, or not clear enough about what the story is about. So he's there for that, and he was there for that. So.
And you've done quite a lot of films where you've had like sort of there've been 2 directors, there've been a sort of co-director and so forth. How does that work on a kind of practical way? Do you divvy up who's going to do what, or do you both kind of work across everything? How does that work in practice?
When I did Despicable Me 3 with Chris Renault, it was spread out. Like he didn't have anything to do with animation. I would handle that. He would take care of the boards, and I would do sometimes very much something else on the boards. But I had this. It was my kingdom animation and rendering also. And when I started working with Kyle, he was taking care of storyboard and story, and I was taking care of everything else, rigging. everything that had to do with animation and rendering. And also the reason why I think we're usually paired up is just practical. Is that like it's 3 years, it's intense, and if you're not two, then no one goes in. Well, on this one, I didn't go on vacation, so I didn't have like any rest at all. Like it was like I was working, throughout Christmas.
I was going to ask. I mean, sometimes these films, obviously you have a budget and you have a period of time you need to complete them within. But once that date is announced, it's very rare they change the date, isn't it? And that must put a big pressure on when you've got to, how close to the bone you've got to deliver it as well. Because obviously they would normally want to press screen it and show it to people and test it maybe and show it to the merchandisers and all those kind of things. No.
All these movies go through tests. Usually we have 3 or 4. And it's something that is ongoing. Meaning, on Minions we were deemed too violent, and so we had to we were tech savvy, really physical comedy with hammers on the head and stuff like that.
But that has been, as you touched on there, throughout the history of animation, there has been that kind of
yeah. But then, to be fair, in the first Minion, the first couple of 10 minutes, we kill. We have the Minions kill like a lot of people.
Okay.
Apparently, it's frowned upon in the States. So.
The serial killer Minions.
Yeah.
Despicable Me 3, in terms of making that film, did it take a lot to persuade you to kind of come back and do another film, or were you happy to revisit that territory?
No, I was not happy, and I was the only one free, and I ultimately Chris really, not forced me, but said like, we got to launch this one, otherwise we don't have a movie in I don't know what year it came out in. And so
and you've been nominated for an Oscar for number 2 as well, haven't you? Which is a big accolade. I mean, certainly, some of your concerns that you've expressed today about those things must have been allayed by that, mustn't they?
Well, yeah, but still, with Despicable Me 2, I was not happy with the way it was, was written and the way it was done. I had doubts when it was over. I didn't see that it was the best thing that we had done so far. I just saw the pain it was to get there. Despicable, and the first movie was about a bad guy becoming good in the context of those 3 little girls. The second movie was, that grumpy guy finding love, and I guess that was it, like this romantic comedy sort of escapade. The third one was that guy no longer evil, no longer bad, meeting his brother. So that was better pitches in life than that, because then how does it end? Nobody had a clue, and we pitched out the idea of how it should have, how it ended like early on, but we were cast aside like, no, we got to find something else. And in the end, we did our ending, but we had only like 2 weeks or 3 weeks to finish it, which is like really like ugh. So it's like.
It wasn't as enjoyable experience for you as some of the other ones have been.
Not at all. And also, like, again, it has its moments, and I saw it, and I saw the mistakes, and when it came out, and when the thing makes 1 billion, everybody says, like, what?
But it's just what I just find interesting. I mean, it's a very British characteristic to be kind of quite self-deprecating and to be very.
Oh, I love you guys. That's why I'm like you.
but I'm fascinated by the fact that obviously the audiences are responding really well. It's not just about the money, but they're putting, but obviously it's for the company it's about the money, but obviously it's being responded to. You heard the response you had today from the clips, but even after all this time, and we're having made all those films, there's still part of you that is kind of still. Yeah. Unconvinced by all interest in it.
Yeah, because I always think of the movie it could have been, and I'm not sure if it would have been more successful.
So few people ever get to make the movie that they want to make.
And sometimes I see in other people like, oh, they had the freedom to do that movie, but it's not as good as the other ones where So I'm probably in that case also, but I'm guessing like this one maybe might be the one that shows me that they were right all along.
Well, let's have a look. We're going to look at a clip now from Despicable Me 3, and we'll let the audience decide.
I'm noticing a theme about violence
But it's interesting as well because you're seeing these characters develop as well, aren't you? Her relationship with the children, and so there is an emotional. It's not. If it was just lots of sort of silly slapstick fun, I think that would probably get a little bit boring after a while. But there are emotional beats in these films.
Yeah, totally.
That keep the audience connected, as well as being able to enjoy the sort of the set pieces, if you like.
Totally. And that was there from the beginning. It was always going to be silly and with a heart, I would say.
And after making 3, you didn't dip your toe properly back in the water with the other with
no,
the next
because
2.
they had me at Despicable Me 3. I helped out, and I said like, well, you got to find me something else. And I think I took a year off, and during that year, they came back to me and said like, would you mind helping Kyle out on Minions 2, because I think he was a little bit in over his head, and they hired someone else, and I mean didn't fit, so I helped out like for it was supposed to be 2 months, but I stayed a year. I took care of different sequences, and
it's more than just helping out. That's a year. It's quite a long time, isn't it?
I know. 2 months a year. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But
you were voicing them still.
Oh yeah, I have a separate contract for the voices now.
Do you have your own voice agent?
No, I don't have an agent. Yeah, I'm weird, but it's. I mean, it's something between Chris and I that as long as.
I mean, nobody else could do the Minions now, because I mean, it's very much.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Well, they haven't. But luckily, we haven't got to that point yet, anyway, where they've had to think about that.
But also, there's this weird thing, because they do stuff in marketing where they take like sentences and kludge them together. To me, it doesn't make any sense. To them, it does. So I don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like I created something that maybe can live without me. I have no clue.
So bearing in mind that, as I understand, you continue to work for the studio during the years between this and then pitching Minions and Monsters.
Yeah.
Obviously doing other things and developing other things and so forth. So what was it that brought you back to the franchise in a sense? I know that you had the ability to kind of direct and come up with a story yourself, and so very much you're kind of putting more of yourself on screen. But what was it finally that kind of made you conclude to come back?
It was, again, Chris Maledandri giving me a one-liner where I couldn't say no. He's basically, he called me one weekend and said like, oh, you're going to say no, obviously Minions, blah, blah, blah. And, but I have this idea, but I don't know where it leads. And his one-liner was just like, okay, maybe there's a Minion. He wants to make a movie, a monster movie. And then they need a monster, so they summon it or create it. He built it, maybe. He didn't quite get into details. And that monster obviously turns on the Minions and turns on Earth, and eventually he's going to destroy the universe until the Minions like need to maybe correct their mistake. But putting the monster aside, while he was telling me that story, I was there like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if I came back to it, I really wanted it to do my way and tell the story of like forget Minions 2, and go back to the source and make a better Minion 1, basically. And so for that to happen, I just said like, well, if they're making a movie, wouldn't it be cool if it happened like during the golden era in Hollywood, so that I could could make a timepiece and have references that could help the Minions out. When you're making these sort of movies, you got to have as I was saying, like a context or something that inspires you or something that you want to achieve. Like this one, when I had the idea of like Hollywood in the 20s, it was like, oh, timepiece. I could build stuff as they were, and so the whole idea came from when I pitched it. I said to Chris like, okay, well, just leave me 3 weeks. Let me write an outline, and if you agree, then I'll continue to the next step of like making the outline something bigger and so on. And so I did that, but it wasn't 3 weeks. It was a week later. I sent him the thing, and he said like, yeah, sure, maybe this, change it. Changed the thing, became 3 pages, became like this almost like half of a script, but it already had the beginning and the middle and the end of the final movie, and so after a month, he said like, well, do you want to make it? Should we? I said like, ooh, yeah, let's do it. I have, and the whole, and I had it was the first time that I had control over over the casting, over the script, over what was told. If there was a sequence that I boarded that didn't work, I would rewrite it without asking permission. I really had the feeling of making a little bit more.
And there's some quite nice little surprises in there that we obviously won't allude to now, but there are certain bits that happen in the film and certain characters and stuff that people will be, I think, surprised and excited by when it's kind of out
That's
there.
why I was talking about that French-Belgium comic book thing where it's something happens, and you don't know where the movie is going. Like there's this stuff that's happening in the midpoint of the movie, and you don't know where the movie is going to go.
So our friends at Universal have given us a little teaser clip from the film, which we're going to play in a moment. This is the point where, if your phone is out, the wrestling will start. But I think do you want to send me to set it up, or do you want to watch the clip? And
I don't know what we're showing.
Okay, well let's go straight. Let's dive straight in that case. Let's watch the clip. So that's your own work now.
Yeah.
But it's I really love the fact, you've gone back to, as you say, that you've gone back to the kind of classic Hollywood moment. You're referencing, obviously your real kind of film fandom is coming out because you're referencing a time, you say, this golden age. And I think people are going to discover very soon, because I think it comes out on the 1st of July. It's a really good balance between keeping that kind of emotional resonance with having the action, keeping something in mind that's kind of both adults and kids are going to enjoy. But that's quite a balance to strike, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the hardest, and it comes from a place that, well, I think everyone that does movies, like movies for family, I think should be thinking about the children, but also the parents of the bunch, because they're the ones that are accompanying. And the number of movies that I saw that were more for the smallest kids of the family, and we're not at all thinking about the two adults, like just like being very bored of what they were seeing. So I always try to, and it's hard to do, but to have like different, like to have degrees, like the first degree of storytelling, which is for the kids, and then the second level, which is, and third possibly, where it becomes fun for the adults, because they get the reference, or they get something that's happening in the background, or something that's a little bit more intellectual and witty. But that's super hard, because you can't really tell if it's working until you have it like all assembled.
And bearing in mind, obviously, it's presumably been a good sort of 3 years in the making, or however long these films take normally. It's not been shown properly. The world premieres on Sunday. You're at that period just beforehand where I guess you are a little bit nervous because you don't know what's going to happen. But are you feeling as happy as you possibly can be, having heard?
Yeah, but I'm starting to have doubts now.
Jesus, it's too late.
No, it's really too late. But yeah, you start getting scared because it's not like the other movies. It's not silly from beginning to end. It has those little waves, and like I was saying, I like.
That makes it more interesting, and that makes it more you as well, by the sound of it.
But maybe it's also a little bit more for adult, like from that perspective.
I mean, the kind of original question was around the kind of balance. I think that balance is there. I think definitely people who take their kids will both be happy, and I think the kids will be happy too. I think that definitely. We'll see. But and was it test screened? Is that?
Yeah, it was test screened, but not in the usual term. It was test screened like fairly early on. We got good notes, and then it was tested like 2 other times. But it was very strange, because usually Chris has opinions, and here he said like, well, no, it works. And so very eerie to hear like a studio, a big head of, a big shot, which you trust in terms of like he knows what the audience likes and dislikes, and him not saying anything,
and he would, no matter how much you might have that relationship, he would, because they're not going to put their bank balance behind that film, are they? If they're not happy. Before we have got time in a moment to just get a couple of quick audience questions, but we are just going to show the trailer from the film just to give everybody a kind of proper kind of.
Which is
Yeah.
kind of weird because I don't get to edit the trailer, but every time
No,
I
of course,
see
it's out of your hands in that respect.
but every time I see like what they're doing with the trailers, it's like, whoa, like you don't need to see the movie, you're going to see everything there.
So you don't have to pay and watch the film. You can watch the trailer.
Apparently, I went too far with that nose clown, and so it's no longer in the movie. I know, right? Changes everything.
When you know how some studios like put little Easter eggs in, and they put little sort of special references to other films and stuff like that. Is that something you do with these films?
Oh yeah, I think I'm sort of afraid each shot needs to have an idea with it, animation idea, pictorial idea, sound idea, music idea, and so I try to fill it in with stuff that is not necessarily to the main story, but I mean, if you look at the background, I hate doing like shots, counter shots, like the sort of discussion without it being interesting. Either the character needs to be doing something, because usually when you do that, that means you have like a plot point to convey. But I don't like doing that. That's the reason why I think it was like out of all the movies we reference and we love, the movie starts in a museum like about movie making, and there's King Kong, portraits of George Lucas and Orson Welles and stuff, and there's the plane from Airplane, and there's a reason for that because I think it's the ultimate it's the best movie ever.
Yeah.
And in those movies, I mean, you could watch them over and over and over again because a lot of
so much visual
Exactly.
comedy as well
Yeah.
as
everything that it's funny because you'll see if you go see the movie because James is drawing throughout the movie and he's actually drawing the story that you're seeing, so there's this depth to it.
Oh, cool.
But everything is storyboarded, but the sort of it's not an innovation, but usually we have a team of like 10 storyboarders for 3 years just about. We had only 5, I think, for this one, just because I really wanted to have the thing really loose, so the storyboards are not like pushed. They don't have like they're not sophisticated in any way, but they convey what they need to convey, meaning the gags, the story points, and everything that's cinematic is done in layout, meaning that there's an interpretation of the very flat storyboards into layout that's done in layout. So that sort of permitted us to test stuff really rapidly, loosely, and just because that other step would bring it like its filmic quality. It's a little bit of both, actually. It's a good question because, like for instance, in the first movie there were little cloth simulation. Now there's cloth simulation everywhere. It's in terms of rigging, we've gotten better also, meaning that we can actually rig something and not nearly. We can't play real time, that's for sure. That's our next big step because when I work with animators, it's really like an iterative process. I asked to see blocking like fairly early on just so that I can intervene and say like, okay, well, kill that idea, bad idea, my part. I gotta find like another one. I'll give you like another sound that you can animate to, and what I found was that, and I got slightly better at rendering also. Like I wanted this movie to look slightly different because I thought that Minions one was really like for me like some sort of milestone because when I look back at it, I still think it's pretty, and it's well lit. I think the second Minion they did was really like a couple of steps back. So when I came back, I really wanted to make visually fit so that in 2 years it's still watchable in terms of quality. but yeah, it doesn't feel like today there is any technological limit to what we can do. It's just a taste thing now. Like if you wanted to do something, like a long-haired character with a long dress coming out of water, you could do. So there's no limit to. At some point in the movie, there's this sorcerer, and it's strange. He's got this long robe, but he's got also this like a super long beard. We couldn't have done it like a few years back, I guess, and just because we could, we did. After I finished the mix, I spent 3 weeks doing sound related stuff. The first week is apparently I'm saying like a lot of swear words in all sorts of different languages that I'm saying, body parts.
And you're just not aware of them, basically.
No, because I'm thinking like that I'm not saying like improper words, but and also people hear stuff that I'm not saying, so I can't go against that. Like they're saying like, oh, you're saying that, but I can't. I'm saying that I'm not saying that word, but if they hear it, then I got it. So I spent like a week working on the offensive stuff that I
inadvertently
say, yeah. And I spent 2 weeks redoing words for different countries if they have a meaning for the for plot points, meaning like throughout the movie, like in the first meetings they're saying Big Boss. Apparently, Big Boss is not universal. So I got like as for instance, like in South American countries they say Grande Jefe. So I got to do like all those minions that I did in English. I got to redo them in in all these different languages.
That's really time consuming, isn't it?
Well, I'm kind of fast. I gotta say. But it's it's ruining my voice like every time, like when I have to do 10 minutes.
I've got a separate contract with the minutes.
No, but it's highly, it's actually enjoyable because I learn new words, but it's also like I've heard what the if I don't do them, I've heard what they do, and I just couldn't live with it.
Big responsibility. So that's where we're going to call it a day. It's been so fantastic to have Pierre talking to us. I want to thank Mayran from Universal, who's been brilliant and has really, really helped us put together today's event. But a huge, huge thank you to Pierre Coffin.